Hey there, welcome to Dennett on Cricket. I'm Paul Dennett. It's 10 past 3 here in the morning in Sydney. I've just watched Australia and India in the semi-final of the Champions Trophy. I thought I'd record something straight away with the hope that it'll be up such that any Australian waking up who didn't get to see the match will get to hear a bit of a summary of what occurred. And if you're in India and you're looking forward to hearing some Aussies feel a bit sad about things, then you can hear me straight away. Apologies if I speak quite softly. I'm very keen not to get divorced by waking the rest of the family up. And apologies if I'm a bit all over the shop. It is, as I said, just after 3 in the morning. The thing is, I expected Australia would lose this game. I gave us a chance, obviously, but I expected that Australia would lose. But it was very different to how I expected, even though sadly that the result was the one that I had thought. I thought that Australia would probably collapse against the Indian spinners, and instead, at the innings break, I was actually fairly positive. And I think what I got fooled by was thinking that this pitch was a little bit too similar to the one where India had played New Zealand in the semi-final. All the commentators were saying, now, and actually Jadeja said it in the innings break, this pitch is better than that one. It's the best one that they've played on in Dubai so far. To my untutored eye, it didn't necessarily look that way. And I thought actually the pitch was quite difficult, and I thought Australia had batted exceptionally well. So let's look at the Australian innings a little bit. Australia won the toss and batted, which looked like it was going to be key. That's the way to go in this tournament in Dubai. Australia brought in Tanveer Sangha and Cooper Connolly for Spencer Johnson, who was dropped, and Matt Short, who was injured. India went in unchanged. Crowd was pretty small initially. It built up. Probably, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 full in Dubai. And there was drama right from the start. Head got dropped in the second ball by Mohammad Shami. One of two dropped catches that Shami was to produce during the match, although he ended up bowling sensationally well. It was very difficult for the openers right at the start. And the ball was stopping and popping, not the same conditions that they'd been facing in Pakistan. And the end of the story was that Connolly wasn't able to handle them, and Head was. Connolly wafted away, eventually getting a duck off 9 balls. You had to feel sorry for him, being thrust into the side and opening up without much experience. Head's first 11 balls, he scored just 1 run as he got used to conditions, and his next 8, he scored 25. And that was an exhilarating passage of play, and you kind of... I felt for the Indian fans who would have been thinking, "Oh, this guy is he going to torment us yet again?" I mean, Head played a sort of a flick off the hip that went for 6. That right at the point where the pitch looked difficult, he's just gone, "Nah, I'm going to play the shots that only I can." 3 consecutive 4s at one point. It was, as I said, pretty exhilarating stuff. They brought on Kuldeep Yadav in the power play. And actually, Dinesh Karthik in commentary made the point. They don't normally do that. They bring on Akshay Patel as their first spinner, but such was the power of Travis Head. They wanted someone who, left arm leg spin would be spinning it away from the bat of the left-hander. Well, Head greeted him with a 98 metres 6, advanced down the wicket, one of the purest, most beautiful shots you would ever see. But then, Varun Chakravarti, who wasn't even in the side, but was brought into the 11 for the New Zealand game, took 5 wickets and stayed in. Head, they were making the point, had never faced him before. You'd like to think that, well, given he's a mystery spinner, he bowls leg spin ostensibly, but he does lots of different variations. Maybe you'd give yourself a few to get used to it. Nah. Head tries to hit first ball for 6, and I'm not criticising him because that's the way he plays. Turned out to be a wrong and mistimed it, got caught in the deep. From there, Smith and Labuschagne really had to fight against high quality bowling. And it was at this point, I thought that the Australians actually batted well. I thought they were realising 250 could be a winning score on this pitch. Let's not squander the chance to get 250 by trying to get 300. And so they absorbed some pressure. There was a crazy over. The 14th over to Smith was a maiden. The 5th ball, there was almost a run out. And then the 6th ball, Smith sort of defended it. It dribbled back and actually hit the stumps, but the bails stayed on. Shortly after that, there was a period of 10 consecutive dot balls. Actually, that would have been part of the 10 consecutive dot balls. Then there was another stat. It was 50 balls between boundaries before Labuschagne finally hit one. They started to get a little bit of fluency, and that's when Jadeja, quality bowler that he is, it was so impressive that the previous over he bowled one that spun sharply, and next over to Labuschagne, similar sort of action, but straight on, bang, the dreaded straight one. Plum in front, didn't challenge. Actually, it was only umpire's call on when they showed Hawkeye, but obviously it would have stayed out. And that's just, Jadeja, can never speak too highly of him, such a wonderful player. Smith brought up his 50 off 68 balls, and I again thought this shows this pitch is not easy. When you've got a player of the quality of Steve Smith scoring, what you would call in modern day one-day cricket fairly slowly, and I thought he was playing really well. Inglis came out and played very, very nicely for a little quick innings. Went to punch Jadeja off the back foot and got caught at cover. Another one that had stopped out for 11 off 12, further feeding my thought that this was a tough pitch. Smith was accelerating by now. Their partnership had been 34 from 27. And then Carey came out and he batted beautifully. Just such an intelligent innings and so much skill several times. Crisp shots, sweeps for six, and lofted cover drives. Cannot overstate how well he batted. Then, strange moment. Smith, 73, advances to a full toss that from Shami and completely misses it. And it was just like, wow, how did he miss that? He's playing so well. 73 from 96. Out comes Maxwell. My heart's in my mouth. He hits his fourth ball for six. Glorious kind of, almost an orthodox sweep with a little bit of slog sweep elements. But just as I was starting to mount my next campaign for Maxwell to be Prime Minister and Captain and wicketkeeper and everything, he got bowled by Akshar Patel. The next ball looked ugly. The best and worst of Maxwell in no time. And that brought Dwarshuis out. And, Dwarshuis is a very good, powerful hitter. But Chakravarti was bowling really well. Kuldeep Yadav was bowling really well. I thought, again, Dwarshuis and Carey did okay. They got the next 30 balls. They only scored 18 runs, but I could have seen the collapse could have been on. Australia was 6 for 205 when Dwarshuis came out and could have been all out for 230, but I thought they played sensibly. Carey brought up his 50 from 48 balls. Just as Dwarshuis started to get a bit of fluency, he smashed Kuldeep Yadav for a 6 and was looking okay. He holed out for 19 off 28. Then I've written actually a thing that Carey was batting sensibly. Cannot afford a mini collapse when 265 might be enough. So that was a mixture of highly prescient and highly unintelligent, because 265 is indeed what they got. So I predicted the score right, but it wasn't enough. Anyway, Zampa was given out LBW off Shami, and this is not a major moment in the match because it ended up being not significant. But he reviewed it and turned out there was an inside edge. It was one of these ones where they had scampered through for what turned out it would have been a single because there was that inside edge. Zampa was 2/3 of the way down the pitch before the umpire's finger had been raised. They got the single easily, but because the umpire gave it out LBW, Australia didn't get that run, which I think is something they have to look at, that they should play to the whistle and rather than have that situation, because eventually you're going to get a World Cup final get decided by something like that and there'll be massive controversy. Anyway, after having lauded Carey for playing so sensibly, he did something a little bit silly with about 3 overs to go, tried to retain the strike and got himself run out, 61 off 57. Ellis hit a 6 and then got out trying to hit another one. Zampa finished with 7. So they finished up with, I said 265, they finished up with 264, bowled out off 49.3 overs. It was generally agreed in the commentary box that they left a few out there, that they were on target for probably 290 or thereabouts. But naively, I still thought that was a pretty good total. As I said, Shami was impressive, 10 overs, 3 for 48. Hardik Pandya copped a little bit of tap, but the rest of them all going for 4 and 5 and over. Chakravarti 2 wickets, Jadeja 2 wickets, and Smith top score 73 and Carey with 61. So the Indian innings begins, and we had a couple of very unusual, un-Australian type instances of poor fielding. Connolly, poor old Connolly, drops Rohit off Ellis at point. It wasn't a sitter, but it was certainly catchable. And then there's this incredible moment that was so similar to what happened at the World Cup. If you remember in the World Cup, Rohit Sharma hit one, sort of got an inside-out edge, and it was Travis Head who ran with the flight of the ball and took a fantastic catch. Well, this time it was Dwarshuis bowling, similar shot, Labuschagne ran after it and just couldn't quite hang on. And everyone's sort of talking about omens, and this is only going to go India's way because it was so similar but with a different result. Anyway, a moment after that, Gill dragged one on to Dwarshuis and Australia got their first wicket. And again, I thought, that's the pitch, because it kept a bit low. And I was thinking, Australia is definitely in this. Then, how about this? So there's 7 overs, 1 for 42. Who's batting? Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli. It's inside the power play. Cooper Connolly, having scored a duck off 9 and dropping a catch, is now thrown the ball. Talk about pressure. And I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but he just looked like he had no feeling of pressure. He just looked so calm and confident. And in his first over, he gets Rohit Sharma. Rohit Sharma tries to sweep one, plum LBW, reviews, but 3 reds. And at this point, I was really thinking Australia had a big chance. And Win Predictor backed me up. Australia was a 60% chance of winning at this point. And I'm thinking, well, a minute. Zampa hasn't bowled yet. Tanveer Sangha hasn't bowled yet. Glenn Maxwell hasn't bowled yet. Australia's probably least credentialed spinner, Cooper Connolly, has looked really good. And I was getting excited. I was thinking this could really happen. And then that was the moment, the sort of the weirdest turning point in the game, that Australia just became, tame and insipid after that, in the sense that Kohli batted magnificently and Shreyas Iyer batted really well as well. But they were just doing it risk-free. They were just going at 5 and over, taking the singles, knocking it round, hitting the occasional boundary. And everyone was saying, this is just too easy for India. Now, Maxwell at one point dropped a tough one at mid-off the bowling of Connolly. When he'd come back on, that was Kohli. So that would have been a massive wicket. But I think at this point, Smith probably needed to act. He needed to get an extra fielder into the ring. He needed to try to force the issue, because India were just killing Australia with 1,000 cuts. And, there's all this talk of Smith being a tactical genius. I'm not necessarily saying Cummins would have done much better. I think one of my criticisms of Cummins is that he is too inclined to put the field back. That's my main criticism of him as a captain. But I think here, Smith probably needed to bring an extra fielder into the ring, and quite probably Kohli would have smashed several boundaries, and India might well have won it more quickly. But I think this was the best chance that Australia had to get the win. Anyway, after a long partnership that really took the game away from Australia, Zampa got through Iyer with a quicker one, bowled him. Iyer finishing with 45 off 62. It was around this point that I was just thinking, Scott Boland would have bowled very handily on this pitch. If you look at my newsletter, pauldennett.substack.com, I mentioned how it was very strange that Boland didn't get picked, not even considered being picked for this Champions Trophy. And I understand his list day record's only modest, but geez, I reckon he would have bowled well on this one. Akshar Patel was out now, batting now. They often promote him up the order almost as a sort of a quasi-pinch hitter, just as someone who can play with some freedom, and it's a bonus if he comes off. He got 27 off 30, eventually got bowled by trying to pull Ellis, one that kept a little bit low. And I noted here, Kohli around about now was on 74, having only hit 5 boundaries, and that's further to my point that I think that we needed to force the issue a little bit more. KL Rahul was brought out, and just was able to knock them round a bit, then started being a little bit more aggressive, and Rahul and Kohli were cruising to victory. And then Kohli, bizarrely, slogs Zampa, gets caught at long on, out for 84 off 98. Fantastic innings, but kind of left the door ever so slightly ajar. It just didn't feel like it, though. The Windiz was giving Australia in the sort of low 20s chance of winning, and it didn't feel that Australia really had a chance. But they kept on fighting. There was periods where Pandya was defending lots of balls, and there was a point where it was 27 needed from 24, and you were thinking, oh, you never know, a few more dot balls here, it could get interesting, and then bang. Pandya went whack, whack, sixes galore, well, not galore, but enough. And before you knew it, it was all over. India got the runs with 11 balls to spare. They were 6 wickets down, but it didn't really feel quite that close. In some ways, it felt a bit like the 96 World Cup final to me, where Sri Lanka chased the runs down, and there was a sort of a growing sense of inevitability. Australia, certainly nothing to be ashamed of from this performance. They played really, bravely, but in the end, India won. And as I said, it was disappointing that for sort of 60%, 70% of the match, Australia looked like they were in with a fighting chance, and then suddenly it just sort of all slowly dissipated. Look at the Australian bowling figures. Ellis, 2 for 49 off 10. Zampa, 2 for 60 off 10. Yeah, got a couple of wickets, but a little bit expensive. And yeah, most of them going for 4s and 5s and 6s. There's no real standout. It was a fairly solid but ultimately unsuccessful effort. So, man of the match, Virat Kohli. No surprises there. He just is an absolute master of the chase. And as I said, I'm being critical of Smith. If he brought the field in as I suggested, they probably would have won with 20 balls to spare rather than 11. But I think that was what they needed to do to give themselves a bit of a chance. So, disappointing, but Australia, I think, can be reasonably pleased with their campaign, albeit it's only 2 matches, 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 rained off. But anyway, I think I'm starting to gibber. I hope you enjoyed that. Please tune in for more episodes. I've got a historical one coming in the next couple of weeks. I think you'll like, and I'll put my words together a little bit better when I'm not quite so tired. But I thought it'd be fun to try to get this one out there nice and quickly.